Welcome to episode number 2 of TRKS, the Remington Kuhn Show. I am here with my second guest, Mateo. Mateo.
Yep.
We just watched UFC 300, the landmark event, and this is our live reaction of what we just
literally
watched.
Just ended 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
Alex Pereira knocking out Jamahal.
Yes.
10 minutes ago.
And there's so much to talk about. So we're coming on to do a live show to talk about everything we just witnessed and more.
Yeah.
So let's first just talk about the fight we just watched.
Jamahal, Alex Pereira?
Yes.
I mean, there's really not a lot to talk about other than, the fight lasted 2-3 minutes. Pereira gets hit in the nuts.
Yeah.
Waves off Herb Dean. Knockout. Welcome back, Jamahal.
What did Joe Rogan say? He's like, he waved him off because he's like, I gotta go kill that guy.
Yeah.
And then literally 5 seconds later, sweet dreams to sweet dreams.
Yeah.
Literally.
And then in the octagon after the fight with Joe Rogan, Pereira mentioned that he wants to fight in Brazil.
Yes.
He took no damage this fight. When is UFC coming to Brazil? UFC 301 next month. So that's going to be a tough fight for Dana to make because Pereira said he wants to do that in heavyweight to move up. So I'm not sure if Pereira's going to have enough time for a heavyweight training camp in a month and a half, month time. I don't know the exact numbers. But that 301 card, in my opinion, looks weak. You throw Pereira on there from Brazil, in Brazil, that'll boost everything. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
As he gets knocked out right behind us.
I hope Pereira's on 301, but it'll be tough to get him on there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked about it. Well, at least you talked about it. Pereira, if Jamahal wouldn't have been ready to fight, he might have fought Aspinall at heavyweight anyways. So he was ready for that now. So because he took no damage, I don't see why you wouldn't want to make the card better than having Pantoja fighting a 10-ranked fighter as your main fight in a pay-per-view event. I just feel like that's more of a fight night level card.
I honestly, no disrespect, but I honestly thought it was a fight night card until I saw UFC 301 in the corner.
I'm personally not buying it, but if Pereira's on there, hey, that juices it up, especially being in Brazil. You talked about maybe they're trying to get Brazilian fighters on there. Who better than Alex Pereira to go on that card? So I feel like it's almost the perfect storm for the UFC to make a little bit more money off their pay-per-view for the people that weren't going to buy it.
And I think regardless whether it happens at 301 or not, Alex Pereira's next fight, he's going for double champ at heavyweight. He's moving up. He's going for double champ. There's really no one else to fight at light heavyweight. He just knocked out returning vacant champ Jamahal. There's really no other worthy contender. I think whether it happens 301 or not, he's fighting a heavyweight, double champ Pereira. I'm all for it.
All right. I'm fine with it as well. So let's just start tracking back through what we watched. So the Pereira fight, let's move back to the Zhang Weili fight. It was an interesting one because she had actually choked out Xiaonan, however, I'm not really sure how you pronounce the name.
I'm really bad at butchering names.
I'm just going to say Yan for the sake of pronunciation purposes. But she had her basically out cold. She
saved by the bell. Saved by the bell.
Literally at the bell, she got up, stumbled, went back into the corner, and they were talking about it on the broadcast. They literally had to bring her back. They had to wake her up. The cut man asked, do you want me to wake her up? And they're like, well, of course we want you to wake her up. Wake her up. She comes out of the second round. She's guns a-blazing. And I'm like, wait, are they allowed to do that? Is what Joe Rogan said. I'm like, I don't know if they're allowed to do that.
Basically, brought her back from the dead.
She was done. Bring her back. And she was landing shots.
She comes back in that second round, lands shots. Really, in that second round, the first time we saw Zhang Weili get thrown around in a UFC octagon. Because I mentioned to you during the fight, in my opinion, I think in most people's opinion, Zhang Weili is the best pound-for-pound fighter the women's division has in any division. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time we've seen her get thrown around in an octagon in that second round. And she almost got knocked out a few times. Jan had the ground control. Round 3 carried the same momentum. And then rounds 4 and 5, she ran out of gas, and Weili just took over on the ground game with all the takedowns.
At one point, Weili was only like minus
160.
Minus
160.
And I was like, wait, what?
And she entered the fight at like minus 500 or something.
It was something crazy, like minus 600 or minus 700, something crazy. And obviously, she, like we said, she is probably, for our money, the best pound for pound. Yeah. You can give it to Grasso, you can give it to Shevchenko, whatever. But I think she's definitely top 3. Yeah. So to put her against somebody that apparently is the longest tenured Chinese women's fighter in UFC, in Yan, who earned that title shot, and for the most part, it was a competitive fight other than that first round. But she had to be brought back is the funny part, because I'm just like, how does that even happen?
And then she gets brought back and just tosses it around Zhang Weili and throwing punches, taking her down, controlling the grounds.
But it was
crazy round 2.
It was entertaining. And
rounds 1 and 2 were great. Yeah. Round 3 was also good, and then she ran out of gas in 4 and 5.
It's the championship rounds that Weili is used to, fighting those 5-round fights. And you see that time and time again in the UFC. The fighters that have the experience in those rounds usually have the advantage in these championship fights because they've been there, they've done that. It's the cardio.
They save their energy in the first, exert it in the last.
It's all strategy, and you're talking about that with somebody that was here watching the fights with us, doesn't know as much about the sport. There is a lot of strategy involved in UFC, and if you just start rushing at somebody, you're putting yourself in a spot, and you see what I'm leading into here. Yeah. The other fight right before that was Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. A crazy fight, but go ahead and say what you saw.
Just great fight. I will say, though, before we get into it, I did expect more from Gaethje, but not that I expected more from Gaethje, is more so Max Holloway was so sharp on both offense and defense that he gave Gaethje no room to do anything. Like, you saw Gaethje, kept, head ducking, looking for any angle to attack. Couldn't find anything. Max Holloway brought his A-plus game today. But other than that, the BMF fight, that was a great fight. Like I said, Holloway controlled most of it. Gaethje finally found some life after down 3-0. 4th round found some life. 5th round found some life. And then the last 10 seconds, they're running around. Holloway says, meet me in the middle. They just start trading haymakers. 1 second to go. Gaethje falls. That was just a great fight.
Unbelievable. And like you said,
perfect way to end it for the BMF title. Holloway is the baddest motherfucker. I don't know if I can curse. Holloway is the BMF of the UFC.
The UFC says it. But Holloway just looked different tonight. We talked about, we expected more of Gaethje, but at the same time, Holloway was just that good. Yeah. And I had a feeling when that fight was starting, as somebody that picked Gaethje to win.
I also had Gaethje.
We see Holloway walking out. I'm just like, that dude's ready. He just looked so good. I was like, I got just a bad feeling about this now.
But Gaethje for us, though, was a biased pick because we like Gaethje as a fighter. And we both love Holloway, too. Yeah. But as a fan favorite, we love Gaethje.
Yeah, of course. And I'm happy for Max, of course.
Yeah. I love Max.
Yeah, I mean, he deserved it. Yeah. He is the BMF right now. And the fact that he was able to, even though it was seemed like the fight was over, but then they go back to replay, and it did end the fight with 1 second left. So not often that you see that to begin with, but the fact that Max Holloway gets the finish against a guy like Gaethje that's so hard to finish, zombie-like, just keeps moving forward, keeps coming at you, continues to pressure, doesn't stop swinging at any point in the fight.
Gaethje was the BMF champ entering the fight. And then Holloway called the shot 10 seconds ago, meet me in the middle on the Monster logo. Trade blows, whoever goes down first.
And that's how you really determine who the baddest man is. Exactly. Because do you have the balls to just go in there and actually swing at somebody?
That's what the BMF belt's all about.
And he understood that. Max Holloway understood the assignment.
And Gaethje understood it too. Yes. There was at least 5 times in that fight where Gaethje should have been knocked out, stayed up. Last 10 seconds, he did not need to go in the middle of that octagon to go trade with Holloway. Because he could have been, egotistical and, save his resume where he doesn't get knocked out. Where, yes, he loses, but it's not a knockout. It just goes with the decision. But he said, screw that. BMF, I am the BMF champ. Going in the middle, trading blows. Ended up losing, but got to give him all the respect.
All the respect. And that's what it's about. The BMF fight is different. It's a different type of belt than a regular UFC belt. You have to make that statement when you get the win. And like we said, Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje, two very deserving, baddest mother effers. And Max Holloway finished the fight. That's what it's all about. The fans got what they wanted. They got a rewarding fight. They were back and forth constantly, all-out action. Max Holloway at his absolute best, the best I've seen him in a long time.
Well, every fight, I always say that's the best I've seen him in a long time.
He keeps getting better. I mean,
he's in his 30s, and in every fight he keeps getting better, which is crazy.
And he should get whatever fight he wants. Just like they were saying.
Even though Max Holloway gets a lot of recognition, just like Gaethje, just like Poirier and all those guys, I still feel like he's underrated in that class with those type of fighters. So I'm glad that even though I am a Gaethje fan, I was biased to him because he's more the fan favorite. I am glad, though, that Holloway ended up getting the win because it'll help him get the respect of the casual UFC fans.
Absolutely. Max Holloway, one of the best.
Yeah.
And let's move on to the next fight, which right before that, it was the fight between Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one as well, one that I personally didn't know who to pick going into that.
Going into that fight, similar to Gaethje, it was more of a homer pick. I'm a Charles Oliveira fan. A lot of people are too. I didn't know who to pick, so obviously I went with my boy Charles. First minute of that fight, first minute, guillotine.
Yep.
Somehow, he does not tap out. Don't know how. The camera zooms in on his face. He is gone. Escapes the guillotine. And the rest is history for that fight.
Yeah.
He just took over the rest of that fight. And then it's not until the late third round with 10 seconds left. Charles gets another choke in. But time runs out. Time wasn't on his side. Too little, too late.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously couldn't see from certain angles how tight that was. But when he had that initial one, it seemed like the fight was going to be over with Oliveira. And
the guillotine looked perfect.
It did. It looked about as good as you could really draw it up. He put perfect position to try to get the finish. And Tsarukyan just, I don't know how he got out of it, but he got out of it. And then he dominated the fight until, like you said, the final few minutes. Oliveira gets another good position, goes for the finish. Those were really the only two submission attempts for Oliveira.
Tsarukyan, he's just... As soon as he got out of that guillotine, he realized what he had to do to win that fight. He just kept taking down Charles and just kept controlling the ground, and that's what got him the win. There was really no strikes in that fight. It was just more of ground game, and he realized what he had to do, just controlled the grounds, won it, and Charles came back too little too late.
I think the other thing is Tsarukyan, he's very underrated. Not many people know about him or how good he is. And
Charles is the underdog coming into that fight.
Correct. That's what I was getting at is Tsarukyan was favored.
Yeah.
Oliveira, obviously, he was in the championship ring for quite a while as far as having the belt, fighting for the belt type of
and then he's fought some injuries in the past year.
And he's battled back from a lot of stuff. He's starting to get a little bit longer in the tooth, but he is a very good fighter still.
Yeah.
So to say that Tsarukyan beat Oliveira not at his best, I don't think that's right. I do think Tsarukyan took advantage of the situation with Oliveira being in that spot in his career, but he's still very, very, very competent as a fighter. So you got to give the credit to Tsarukyan. He's not getting that kind of recognition as far as globally from UFC fans.
I did see a lot of fans online saying that if this was a 5-round fight, they would have thought Charles Oliveira won it. But I'm not going to say I disagree with them, but I'm going to say in the 3 rounds that we saw and 3 rounds that happened, I don't think Charles Oliveira showed enough besides the 2 submissions that he put in.
And one judge did give him the win.
One judge did give him the win and went to split decision, but fans think if it went to 5 rounds, Charles had that one, and that could be a cardio thing, that Tsarukyan's not experienced with that, but from the 3 rounds that we saw, from the 3 rounds that it was, Charles didn't show enough besides 2 submissions. Tsarukyan deserved that win.
Yeah, I am in agreement
entirely. I'm surprised it went to split decision.
Yeah, I was surprised as well. I thought it was going to be 29-28 no matter what for Tsarukyan. But I understand, from somebody's perspective, obviously one of the judges that know more than us, thinking that Charles won, it isn't necessarily crime.
You probably thought the submission at the third round was enough.
Some of them score those submission attempts more than others. I mean, if you have ever played like fantasy UFC, they give you quite a bit of points for submission attempts. That's almost as good as a knockdown. So if you're controlling the ground game and trying to submit somebody, maybe they thought he was going to finish him, if the time would have lasted a little bit longer the round. So you never know how they're looking at it or how much weight they're putting on certain things. So if that's what they were looking for out of that fight, since it was kind of like back and forth, was the submission attempts, I'm all about it. I mean, I'm not going to say that the judge shouldn't be a judge or that, they're in their right mind to say that. I think it was not necessarily a crime to say that Charles won the fight, but we agreed Tsarukyan did enough. 5 rounds, different story. Oliveira's got the championship experience, so I'd probably lean that way as well. Moving into the one before that, that was the Bo Nickal fight. So Bo Nickal obviously put on another one of those wrestling displays that he's put on. A guy that was the best wrestler in all of college at Penn State. So he's obviously got the wrestling down pat, and that's what he does in these fights. He'll take you down and dominate you from start to finish until he finishes you.
Yeah, that's all Bo Nickal needed to do. I mean, if you watch the fight, the fans didn't love it. They were booing majority of the fight. But if you're Bo Nickal, don't change a thing. It's exactly what's working for you. If you know you're going to go in there and beat them in wrestling, go in there and beat them in wrestling. Don't try and, even though, yes, you do want a fan base, don't try and please the fans where it's going to make you lose. Like, don't magically become a striker or anything like that. Just go in there, do your style, and keep winning. You're going to get a championship fight, and by getting a championship fight, you're going to get fans that way.
You can win by wrestling. A lot of guys don't do it because, like you said, the fans are not in it. They want to see one of those Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway slugfest. But if you can beat somebody in an area of mixed martial arts, it's mixed martial arts, right? Yeah. You can strike, you can wrestle, you can do whatever. If you are that good of a wrestler, don't change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You said it. Bo Nickal has his strategy down pat before that fight even starts. He knows he can beat anybody on the ground. So he's the one that's going to be laughing with the bag at the end of the day when he has the belt. Because I don't think there's anybody that can out-wrestle Bo Nickal. No. He hasn't fought anybody yet necessarily that could out-wrestle him. But I put him in like Merab Devaldashi category as far as wrestling. He is that good on the ground.
But when he eventually moves up in the ranks and moves up to maybe a championship fight in the future, it'll be interesting to see how he does with the 5-round fight, and also how he goes against a champion who maybe is a striker or is a kickboxer, where necessarily he won't be able to get them to the grounds because they're going to stay up. And so it'll be interesting to see how his style is going to translate to a championship style fight, and if he can survive on his feet, not on the ground.
Right. I think that's the only test left for Bo Nickal is that 5-round fight, because he's already been at the big stage. Every single fight that Bo Nickal's had has been on a pay-per-view card. It's been the first fight, but he is on a pay-per-view card before he's really even that known. Like, the first time I watched Bo Nickal was on a pay-per-view card. I'm like, wait, okay, what? This guy? Okay, Penn State wrestler. Do a little bit of research. This guy's legit. That's why he's there. He is going to have this stylistic approach of wrestling, just like I said, Merab, who's going to get 10, 12 takedowns in a match if you have to, but obviously get him to the ground, control it, go for the submission, just out-wrestle him, just out-muscle him, really. So I am all about it. It's not as fun to watch, obviously. It's not as aesthetically pleasing as one of those type of Justin Gaethje fights, but I'm a big fan of Bo Nickal. I'll watch him wrestle whoever, anytime, anywhere, and I think he'll out-wrestle pretty much anybody up until he gets to that high level of competition, like you said. So let's move into the prelims, because that covers the main card. That was all 5 fights. The prelim that I want to talk about first is the last prelim fight, which was a pick'em. It was former champ Jiri Prochazka versus Aleksandar Rakic.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting matchup stylistically, because these guys are both big, obviously, and they both like to strike. So when they came out, they felt around for a little bit, but they got to go in, and Jiri actually got hurt pretty early in that fight.
Jiri, we both said to each other, as soon as the first round ended, we both looked at each other, Yuri's done.
Yeah.
He took so many leg kicks in the first round where we saw him drag that left leg where he could barely pick it up, barely walk on it. And we saw it was turning purple. It was swelling up, turning purple. Where, like, he's taking damage. Yeah. And he had a cut on his eye. And then, what was it, the second round? Mm-hmm. Where the finish happened?
The second
or third round?
I think it took till the third round.
Third round?
If I remember correctly.
Either second or third round.
We're not looking at anything. Yeah. We're going by memory.
It's like 1:30 in the morning right now. That happened at like 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Whenever the finish happens, second or third round, comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
TKO on him. Just an insane comeback. Because before the TKO happened, he was still taking shots.
He was.
He was getting beat down.
Limping around.
And then he found one opening.
Yes.
And that's all it took. Went on Rakic. TKO. Amazing comeback.
I was actually impressed by Rakic because I knew he was good. But the fights I remember Rakic for are like fights against guys like Anthony Smith that aren't really, that good anymore. He didn't have one of those signature wins yet. So if he would have been able to take out Jiri and be the number one contender, like
that would have been huge.
So he was almost there too. Like he was winning the fight, and then he just got caught. And that's the thing with guys like Prochazka; they can finish the fight at any time. They have that knockout power.
That's why, going back to the BMF fight real quick, we almost saw that with Gaethje.
Yeah.
It was round 4.
Round 4.
Holloway got caught. Gaethje saw that opening and almost knocked him out. He got a knockdown on Max.
And that's why we also agreed that Gaethje's never out of a fight. Because at any time, he can just barrage you with strikes.
Yeah.
And it could be over before it even, really started. So that's the thing with Rakic. He got out to the early lead, clearly won the first round, had Prochazka's leg beat up, had him caught. I mean, he was bleeding the eye, I believe.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
legs were
honestly,
swollen.
it was bad. And then Prochazka just caught him. He was limping around even when he was throwing those strikes. Like, he was not moving well at all. And, man, just a perfect shot. And it happens. That's why we watch the sport. I mean, you could be losing a fight the entire time, and then just bang, it takes one shot, and that's the fight. It's over.
Yeah.
So, moving forward into the women's fight, I believe with Holm and Kayla Harrison, because I don't really remember any of the other ones.
Aljamain Sterling.
Aljamain. Okay, so let's go Aljamain first, because that was the one right before Prochazka. So Aljamain Sterling fought against Calvin Kattar.
I believe so.
And Aljamain Sterling pretty much just...
That was a redemption fight for him.
Yeah.
Lost the title to Sean O'Malley, where people thought that was an early ending to that fight, but we're not going to get into that.
No. Yeah.
But lost the title to Sean O'Malley. His first fight back since then, he had to get a win to stay relevant, really. Just to get straight to it. To stay relevant, he had to get a win. He was on the prelims, not on the main card as a former champion. Same thing with Jiri Prochazka. Good statement win for him. Controlled the ground. And, I think that win is going to bring him back up to maybe another title fight with O'Malley. Oh, no, not O'Malley, because he moved up a division for this fight. So, maybe he moves up in this. I don't know what division he's in right now, but maybe he moves up to a title fight if he just keeps winning.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Aljamain Sterling. He was dominating, right? The only reason, the only guy that we really thought could combat him up until O'Malley was Merab, and he wasn't going to fight Merab because they're friends and teammates. So I thought Aljo was pretty much untouchable, and then O'Malley starts to just take this meteoric rise up the ranks, and obviously we always saw the potential in O'Malley.
Yeah,
but
the Contender Series.
Yeah, and were we ever really going to see that pay off? I mean, as far as actually come to light how great Sean O'Malley could be and see him fulfill his destiny, he did. And obviously it wasn't something we could have predicted. So at one point Aljo was the guy, and he's just showing that he still has flashes of that same brilliance that was Aljamain Sterling, and he was that dominant fighter in that division not that long ago. He had a couple tough losses, but it's still Aljo, and if he keeps having performances like that, O'Malley's going to have no choice but to have to, defend his belt against Aljo again, even if he does get that second belt. Aljamain Sterling is not going anywhere anytime soon. So
he moved up a division, though, for this fight. So in this new division, it'll be interesting how he fares off against these other guys.
Yeah, I agree. So with Aljamain, good win for him. Like you said, redemption. And then the fight before that, which will be the last one we discuss, Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison coming to the UFC. This was her first fight. Now, she gets to come on UFC 300 because it's Kayla Harrison. She's got gold medals. She dominated in the PFL. She was the best female fighter other than Larissa Pacheco in the PFL. And she comes over to the UFC. Obviously, money has something to do with it, but also Kayla Harrison's trying to prove that she can still win belts. And there's not really anybody in her division that I think is going to be able to take her. She just took the number 5 spot from Holly Holm, one of the most accomplished women's fighters we've ever seen. Kayla Harrison's also up there on that list, though. It's just she's never been to the UFC, so she hasn't proven it against the best of the best, because obviously the UFC is still considered the number one MMA organization. So we see her against these type of players like Holly Holm and whoever else she ends up fighting in the UFC. It's obviously a step up in competition.
Kayla Harrison, if she's in the UFC for the long run, she just made a huge statement win that she's here, she's ready to fight, she can take on whoever. Now going to Holly Holm, maybe it's time to hang them up. Put down the gloves. Haven't really done much lately. What have you done for me lately? Type of business. Didn't put up the best fight. Didn't put up a bad fight though. Maybe it's time for Holly Holm to retire. Get straight to it.
I mean, she had her moments in her career, obviously highlighted by the Ronda Rousey victory, but Kayla Harrison's here now. And Kayla Harrison's number 5, which means Holly Holm gets beefed down the list a little bit. And to be honest, she's never getting another title shot. No. I don't think. So
she's too old.
And Kayla Harrison, not young, but she is still, I would say, in the prime of her career.
Or at least towards the end of her prime, one or the other.
To the point where she could effectively get a title fight immediately, which is what she called for. Understandably so. Now, most fighters wouldn't come into the UFC, fight one fight, and say, I deserve a title fight. But Kayla Harrison's different because she's already been a champion.
She's proven it.
And she's proven it. And so she comes in with that expectation right away. And beating Holly Holm is just confirmation that she is still at that high level where she would deserve a title shot. I think she could win. So Kayla Harrison obviously is a different breed as far as the women's MMA division is concerned. I just am excited to see her continue to prove herself against the UFC talent. So,
well, I know we touched on all the prelims that we want to talk about, but I will say one of the fights that I watched on the early prelims, Jim Miller versus Bobby Green, amazing fight to watch. That was just a fun fight, and that fight, if anyone watched it, is the fight that we thought we were going to see with Gaethje and Holloway. Not that Gaethje and Holloway was a bad fight at all. It was a great fight. But Jim Miller and Bobby Green, they were just exchanging blows. Jim Miller was all bloody. And that's the exact fight that I think most people thought we would get with Gaethje and Holloway. So if no one has seen Jim Miller versus Bobby Green, I'm not going to say it was the best fight ever, but fun fight to watch. Early prelims. For an early prelims fight, amazing fight.
And the card was stacked from head to toe. I mean, I was mad because I was calling a lacrosse game down the road, and I actually couldn't watch the early prelims. There was a fight with Cody Garbrandt and Deiveson Figueiredo, and I was excited for that fight. I didn't get to see it, so can you tell me about that one a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, that one was just another good fight. I'm going to be honest, since that happened at 6 p.m., I'm blanking on the winner.
Figueiredo.
Figueiredo, I don't remember the finish. I just remember that fight was also really good. For an early prelims, they're free on ESPN Plus, obviously, but you got your money's worth.
Yeah.
Like, with both of those fights on the early prelims, that's probably one of the best early prelim cards I've seen.
Oh, that's great. And the whole card was tremendous.
Yeah.
Obviously, we had to come on here and do a short episode of a podcast of the Remington Kuhn Show to give you guys a little bit of what happened in case you didn't watch the main card, because it was terrific. And this card was set up to be one of the best cards in history, really, because those landmark type, 100, 200, 300, 400, they got to do something special for the century marks.
They said they had to do one special now because they said UFC 400 is not till 2032.
Yeah.
That's 8 years away.
So we got to wait 8 more years for a card like this, probably.
Or maybe 350 will be a big one. Yeah.
I hope so. But it was fun. Thank you guys for watching the show today. We recorded this at 1:30 in the morning. So thank you for tuning in to the Remington Kuhn Show. I will see you next time.